Hello, I'm Adam Kielich, the principal attorney at the Kielich Law Firm in Bedford, Texas. And today's short video is about how child support is calculated under the Texas Family Code. Under the Texas Family Code, child support is ordered in almost every custody proceeding, whether it's included within a divorce or a separate custody proceeding between unmarried parents or between a parent and some non-parent who's seeking some sort of custodial involvement with the children. In some cases, child support will not be ordered by agreement of the parties. Without an agreement, it's almost always going to be ordered, and at a minimum, the court starts with the child support guidelines under the Texas Family Code to determine what amount of child support should be paid. There's a presumption in the Texas Family Code that the guideline amounts are correct and are what should be ordered. However, there are situations in which the court can find that it's in the best interest of the children to either raise or lower the amount of child support away from the guidelines. Child support is normally paid by one parent or one conservator to another parent or conservator. Usually the parent who pays child support is going to be the parent who is awarded less time in whatever the possession schedule is that's ordered by the court, in part to make sure that the parent who has the children more often is getting some help financially with the cost of having the children more frequently. There are situations where the possession schedule can justify both parents paying child support and the amounts are offset against each other, and that can be a way that child support is reduced, particularly in these kind of 50-50 possession schedules or some of the more involved rotating schedules that people get involved with. But let's talk a little bit about the way that the courts calculate child support under the guidelines and some of the basics of how the guidelines work. So in Texas, the Texas Family Code says that we're going to pay child support out of the net resources of the obligor. And the obligor is the person who is obligated to pay child support, and they pay that child support to the obligee who receives the child support. So under the guidelines, there are specific sources of income that are included within net resources, and these are identified within the Texas Family Code by statute. The court can increase or decrease its calculation of net resources based upon some limited circumstances, and the net resources are often reduced under specific rules in the Texas Family Code where the obligor has children in multiple different households and is paying child support to more than one obligee. In most circumstances, the net resources of the obligor will be determined by the sources of income specified by the Family Code, which generally the way this works, and it's really not important to get too detailed in this short of a video, but the sources of income that are available to be included in the net income are added together into a single amount, and they're reduced for specific types of deductions to determine the net income out of the gross income. And this is kind of the same way that you take deductions out on your taxes from your gross income to determine your adjusted gross income that you pay taxes on. In this case, though, to determine the net income for child support purposes, the deductions are going to be the taxes that are withheld, child health insurance premium, union dues, and a very small number of other deductions that are permitted. Out of this calculation, we determine the net resources of the obligor. Under the guidelines, we're going to cap out the net resources used in the calculation for child support at $8,550 per month, so a little less than $100,000 per year. The legislature has decided apparently that if you make more than $100,000, you're probably not spending that money on your kids, which may or may not be true, but at any rate, they've told us this is the cap that's going to apply. And again, some other deductions can come into play where the obligor has kids in other households, but for now, let's just assume that there's one obligor paying to one obligee for a number of kids. The number of kids involved in the child support order will determine what percentage of the obligor's net income or net resources are going to be charged with child support. If there's one child, the family code says 20% of the net income is going to be paid as child support. From there, each child adds an additional 5% to that 20%. So 2 kids will be 25%, 3, 30%, 4, 35, and if you've got 5 kids, you're going to pay 40%. The family code says we're going to cap out child support at 40%, so whether you have 5 kids or 10 kids or 15 kids, you're only going to be cut off at that 40%, and the rest you're going to keep for yourself or some other obligation that you owe. The court can increase the number used for the net income in that calculation if the court believes that the obligor is underemployed or intentionally unemployed and really could be making a much larger number. So in that case, the net income is artificially increased in the calculation. The court can also increase the child support amount after that calculation is done if there are specific reasons why the guideline amount is not sufficient for the children. Common arguments that courts accept is where the child has a disability or some sort of special needs that requires additional medical attention or equipment. Sometimes certain school activities will justify an increase, such as sports or band, some of these extracurriculars. If the parties have agreed to send the kid to a private school, that tuition may justify an increased child support to help cover part of that tuition. But outside of that, courts are usually not very willing to increase the child support without a good reason. There's really no I'm accustomed to a certain standard of living, or my kids are accustomed to a certain standard of living kind of argument that tends to fly very well in courts, at least here in Texas, when it comes to child support. So what you may have noticed is that though that really talks about how to increase the child support amount. There are rare circumstances in which the court will decrease the child support amount. They rarely ever take money out of the net income calculation. But the courts might decrease the amount of child support owed away from what the guidelines say. The most common reason why this occurs is because the parties have agreed to it. Maybe as a condition of settling the divorce or the possession schedule or some conservatorship rights. The parties have agreed to a reduced child support or no child support even, and that would be fine. Courts tend to accept those agreements, especially if attorneys are involved in whatever the custody proceeding is. Otherwise, courts tend not to reduce the child support without a really good reason. The courts want to make sure that the kids are being taken care of, and they are outright obligated by the Texas Family Code to act in the best interest of the children, and it's usually just not in the best interest of the children to reduce the amount of money available to take care of them and provide for their needs. Sometimes people try to float these arguments that the kids really don't need that much money, or the other parent makes a sufficient amount of money. These arguments tend not to work. It's got to be a pretty good argument and something directly related to the kids, and it's just difficult to argue that the kids really need less financial stability rather than more, or whatever the guidelines say in this particular calculation. So that's a very general sense of how child support is calculated. The Texas Attorney General's office handles collection of child support in Texas. Their website has some calculators that are available that can help sort out the specific calculation and provide some estimates. That's a good way to figure out how child support will be calculated in a particular case, as well as whether a modification to increase or decrease the child support is available under the Texas Family Code. And I guess one thing to add is one reason that the courts will reduce child support is if the obligor's net resources or net income has declined, where that person is legitimately making less money and they can't really control it. Maybe they had a pay cut at work and they can't find work that pays better. That tends to be a good reason why the court will reduce child support, but that's not really a reduction in spite of the guidelines. It's a reduction within the guidelines. So if that's the case and you've been ordered to pay child support, you may be entitled to modify that order and gain a reduction. If you're in a divorce or a custody proceeding, those calculators on the Attorney General's website are a good place to go to try to understand your child support obligations. But if you're looking at a modification to change an existing order, it's really a good idea to talk to an attorney on your own and figure out what your best arguments may be to decrease your child support, or if you receive child support, the best arguments to have an increase in child support occur. But that's really the basics. Thanks for watching the video. I'll see you next time.